Your own children tell you that you no longer belong in their world, it feels like being erased while you're still alive. My name is Margaret Hale, I'm 65 years old, and I used to believe that family was the one thing that would never leave you behind. I was wrong. I spent most of my life in a quiet town outside Eugene, Oregon, raising my two daughters, Clara and Emily, in a home that once echoed with laughter, bedtime stories, and the smell of apple pie cooling on the kitchen counter. My husband, Robert, passed away 12 years ago. Since then, it's been just me and the memories we built together. For years, I thought I'd done everything right. I worked as a school librarian, saved enough for retirement, and helped both my daughters through college. I watched them build their careers. Clara became a marketing manager in Seattle and Emily, a tech analyst in Portland. I was proud. So proud. But lately, every conversation with them began to sound like a correction. Like I was a child too slow to keep up. Mom, you can't just keep cash at home anymore. Everything's online now. Mom, nobody watches cable news, we stream. Mom, that's not how people think anymore. Each word chipped away at something inside me. It wasn't the technology one couldn't handle. It was the tone, the quiet condescension that said, "You're outdated. You're unnecessary." The moment that broke me happened one Sunday afternoon. I had driven 2 hours to Portland just to visit Emily. I'd baked her favorite lemon pie, the same recipe her father loved. But when I arrived, she barely looked up from her laptop. "Mom, you really should have texted first. I'm in the middle of a client meeting." Her voice was polite, but her eyes said something colder. Something like "you're in the way." I remember sitting on her couch, pie box unopened, while she finished her call. She didn't offer me coffee, didn't ask about my drive. Later that evening, when Clara joined us for dinner, the conversation turned toward something that changed everything. Emily was talking about investing in a new digital platform, something with AI and crypto that I barely understood. I listened quietly until Clara laughed and said, "Mom wouldn't get any of this. She still writes checks for bills." They both laughed. I didn't. So I asked gently, "Are you saying I'm too old to understand the world now?" Emily smiled awkwardly. "Mom, it's not that. It's just, you live in a different world. The world's moved on, that's all." That sentence. The world's moved on. I smiled too, but it felt like glass cracking inside me. I drove home that night in silence, headlights cutting through the Oregon fog, thinking about those words. When I reached home, the house looked smaller, colder. I stood in the doorway for a long time, listening to the quiet. Then I whispered to myself, maybe it's time I build my own world. I didn't know what that meant yet, not really. But I knew I couldn't keep living as a background character in their lives. Over the next few weeks, something inside me began to stir. I started writing again, something I hadn't done since Robert died. Little journal entries about how life changes when no one's watching. About loneliness. About rediscovering purpose. One morning, I posted a short piece online, just a simple paragraph about aging and love. I didn't expect anyone to read it. By evening, it had over 2,000 likes. Hundreds of comments from women my age saying, "You said what I've been feeling for years." That night, for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. I made a promise to myself. If my daughters thought I didn't understand the world anymore, then I would build one where women like me did. They said I didn't understand the world anymore. But maybe, just maybe, it's the world that stopped understanding me. When I woke up the next morning, I wasn't the same woman who'd gone to bed the night before. Something had shifted. For years, I'd been living on mute, speaking softly, asking for little and expecting even less. But now, people had read my words. They'd felt them. That night, before sleeping, I'd written a small post on a website called Heartthreads, a community forum for women over 50. I titled it, "Learning to Live in a World That Forgot Me." It wasn't poetic or planned. It was just me, raw and honest, talking about what it feels like when your children start explaining life to you like you've never lived it yourself. When I checked my phone the next morning, my post had nearly 4,000 likes and hundreds of messages. Women from all across the United States, from Idaho to Maine, from Texas to Ohio, shared their stories. They'd been dismissed by their kids. ignored at work, told they were too old to understand. I spent hours replying to each one, tears streaming down my face. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. That evening, I brewed myself a cup of chamomile tea, sat by the window, and thought, maybe my world isn't ending, maybe it's just changing. So I made a decision, a small, trembling one. I'd start writing regularly. Not for fame, not for my daughters, but for me. I began sharing stories every week, reflections about love, grief, and what it means to start over when everyone thinks your story's already ended. Within a month, my little writings became popular enough that the Heartthreads moderators asked if I wanted to write a column. They said my words made people feel less invisible. And for the first time in a long while, I said yes without hesitation. Each piece I wrote reached more women, grandmothers, widows, retired teachers, nurses, single mothers. They all said the same thing. You're speaking our hearts, Margaret. One message stood out. It was from a woman named Janet in North Carolina. She wrote, I haven't spoken to my daughter in 2 years. Reading your words made me call her today. Thank you. I cried when I read that. Because maybe, just maybe, healing could spread in small ripples like that. But as my new world started growing, the old one came knocking again. It was Clara. She called out of the blue one Friday evening. Mom, Emily told me you're writing online now? Her tone was cautious, the same way she spoke when she thought I might embarrass her. Yes, I said softly. People seem to connect with what I share. There was silence on the other end. Then she laughed lightly. That's nice, Mom. Just be careful, okay? You don't really know how those online things work. It stung. It always did. But this time, instead of shrinking, I smiled. Thank you for the concern, sweetheart, I said. But I'm learning. After the call ended, I realized something. My daughters were still trapped in their own definition of me, fragile, outdated, dependent. But that wasn't me anymore. Over the next few months, I started a small blog. I named it The Silver Year. It was a space for women rediscovering themselves in their 60s and 70s. I poured my heart into every post, stories about gardening, loneliness, and quiet courage. Soon, thousands were reading it. I started receiving invitations to guest write for online magazines, even podcasts wanting me to share my perspective on aging gracefully. And one day, a letter arrived, an actual handwritten letter, the kind people barely send anymore. It was from a reader in Colorado. She said, Margaret, your words reminded me that my life didn't end at 65. It just started looking different. I kept that letter by my nightstand. That night, as I looked around my little home, the same one that had felt so empty after my daughter's words, it now felt alive. Every corner had purpose again. But life, as always, doesn't let peace last too long. Because just as my world was beginning to bloom, something happened that made me question everything I'd built. It began with an email. Subject line, we need to talk, from Emily. I thought they had moved on. But sometimes, when you start standing tall, the people who made you small notice. The email from Emily sat unopened in my inbox for 3 hours. I stared at the subject line, we need to talk. Those words used to come from me when she was little, usually before a gentle lecture about homework or chores. But now, they carried a different weight, like a warning. Finally, I clicked it open. Mom, I've been reading your blog. Some of what you write, it's too personal. People could figure out who we are. I think it's time you stopped. Love. Emily. Stopped. That word hit harder than it should have. For a long while, I just sat there, listening to the clock tick, the refrigerator hum, and the faint sound of wind outside. Then I typed back, I'll call you in the morning. The next day, I made the drive to Portland again. The same route I'd taken months earlier, only this time. I wasn't carrying lemon pie. I was carrying something heavier, a lifetime of silence I was done keeping. When Emily opened the door, her eyes softened with surprise. Mom, you didn't have to drive all the way here. I did, I said calmly. Because this isn't something to hide behind screens. We sat in her living room, modern, minimalistic, cold. There were no family photos on the walls, just framed prints of city skylines. She spoke first. Mom, I didn't mean to upset you. It's just some of those posts sound like you're blaming us. People might think we abandoned you. I looked at her, my daughter who used to hold my hand crossing streets, who cried when I dropped her at kindergarten. Emily, I said quietly, I never wrote your names. I never blamed anyone. I wrote about feelings. About being invisible. About finding my place again. She sighed, rubbing her forehead. But don't you see? People think everything you post online is about someone. You're airing private things. You're turning it into content. I wanted to be angry, but beneath her irritation, I saw something else, embarrassment. Maybe even fear. Fear that her mother's vulnerability didn't fit into the shiny, filtered world she'd built. Emily, I said softly, for years, I made myself smaller to make sure you could shine. I stayed quiet so you could feel confident. I listened when no one listened to me. Now that I've found my voice again, you want me to be quiet because it doesn't suit your image. Her lips parted. That's not fair. No, sweetheart, I said. What wasn't fair was watching you both walk away thinking I didn't matter anymore. Silence fell between us, thick, heavy. For a moment, she looked like the little girl I used to tuck in at night. Her eyes shimmered, and she whispered, I didn't mean to make you feel that way. I reached across the table and took her hand. It was cold. I know. But you did. And now, I'm trying to find out who I am outside of being your mother. That's not rebellion, Emily. That's survival. Tears welled in her eyes. Mom, I just don't want people to think you're lost. I smiled faintly. Oh, I was lost. But I'm not anymore. She looked away, unsure how to respond. And that was okay. For once, I didn't need her validation. That night, as I drove back home, I pulled over near the Willamette River. The city lights reflected in the water, and I thought about how many years I'd spent measuring my worth through my daughter's approval. Not anymore. The next morning, I wrote another post. It was titled, The Day I Spoke Without Fear. In it, I wrote, Sometimes, the hardest thing for a mother is to stop asking permission to exist. The post went viral. Not just among older women, but among young ones too. Daughters who finally understood their mother's silence. Mothers who finally found words for years of quiet hurt. Emails flooded in from radio hosts, book clubs, even a local talk show in Seattle. They wanted me to come speak. And for the first time, I said yes, not because I had something to prove, but because I had something to share. That day, standing in front of the mirror before leaving for the interview, I saw myself differently. Silver hair, faint lines, tired eyes, but strong. A woman who had built her own world, one word at a time. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of my journey. Because when you start rising, the world, even your family, has to adjust to the new version of you. And not everyone is ready for that. They thought I was too old to begin again. But I was just old enough to understand what truly matters. The morning of my first live interview, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. The reflection staring back at me didn't look like a 65-year-old widow from a quiet Oregon town anymore. She looked like a woman who had walked through storms and still found the strength to smile. I wore a simple navy blue sweater and a silver pendant that Robert had given me on our 25th anniversary. As I pinned my hair, I whispered to the mirror. You did it, Margaret. You built something from the ashes. The studio was in Seattle, bright lights, microphones, busy people with headsets. I felt like a visitor from another century. But when the host, a kind woman named Elena, took my hand and said, Margaret, your words have touched millions. The nerves melted away. During the interview, she asked, What inspired you to start sharing your thoughts at this stage in life? I smiled. Being told I didn't understand the world anymore. It hurt. So instead of trying to fit into theirs, I decided to build one that made sense to me, and for women like me. The room went quiet for a moment. Even the sound crew paused. Later that day, clips from that interview spread across social media, shared by people of all ages. Comments poured in. My mom needed to hear this. This woman just spoke my soul. I want to be like her when I'm 65. It felt surreal. I wasn't famous, and I didn't want to be. But I had become something I hadn't been in years heard. My blog readership exploded overnight. I started hosting small online sessions where women could talk about reinvention, aging, and freedom. Some called it a movement. I just called it a home. Weeks later, my phone rang. It was Clara. Mom, I saw your interview. Her voice was softer than usual, almost uncertain. You did? Yeah. People at work were sharing it. I didn't realize how many women felt that way. There was a pause. Then she added, I'm proud of you, Mom. That sentence, so simple, yet so long overdue, made my eyes sting. We talked for over an hour that night. For the first time, not as mother and daughter, but as two women, both trying to understand life, purpose, and identity. She asked how it felt to have people listen again. I told her the truth. It feels like I came home to myself. But life, with its strange sense of timing, wasn't done teaching us yet. A month later, I received a call from Emily. Her tone was different, hesitant, almost apologetic. Mom, can we meet? I owe you an apology. We met at a small coffee shop halfway between Portland and Eugene. When she walked in, I saw the same nervousness I once had, that fear of not being understood. She hugged me tightly, then whispered, I read all your posts. Every single one. Anne, I get it now. Her eyes filled with tears. You weren't attacking us. You were finding yourself. I was just too proud to see it. I held her hand and said softly, we all build walls when we're afraid. But sometimes those walls keep love out too. For the first time in years, we sat together, mother and daughter, laughing, crying, healing. She told me she wanted to help me turn the silver year into something bigger. You've created a space for so many women. Let's make it grow, she said. And, just like that, the daughter who once told me I didn't understand the world was now helping me build one of my own. Together, we launched a small online platform for women over 60, sharing stories, artwork, and experiences. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Emails started pouring in from around the country, women who finally felt seen, daughters who began calling their mothers again, families reconnecting through empathy. I realized something profound then. I hadn't just built a world for myself. I'd built a bridge between generations. They said I didn't understand the world anymore. But maybe the truth was, the world had forgotten what understanding really meant. As I watched my daughters helping women online, I whispered to myself, Robert, I wish you could see this. The sunset spilled gold across my little Oregon porch that evening. And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel left behind. I felt ahead. Sometimes, losing your place in their world is how you find your own. It's strange how life turns. One day you're sitting alone in a quiet house, wondering if anyone even remembers who you are. And another day, you're sitting in a sunlit cafe with women half your age telling you that your story gave them courage to start again. That's how my life feels now, like it came full circle, but not to the same place. To somewhere higher. 2 years have passed since the day my daughters told me, Mom, you don't understand the world anymore. And maybe they were right back then. But now, I don't just understand the world. I understand my place in it. The community we built, the silver year, has grown beyond anything I imagined. What began as a single blog post now reaches thousands of women across the United States, from small towns in Kansas to big cities like New York and Chicago. We share stories, hold online meetups, even run workshops on how to start again at any age. Emily handles the technical side, Clara manages community events, and I just write. Words that come from life, from heartbreak, from the gentle wisdom that time gives you if you listen. Last spring, something happened that made me smile in a way I hadn't in decades. I was invited to speak at a women's conference in Washington, D.C. They wanted me to talk about reinvention after 60. As I stood on stage, lights shining down, I could see hundreds of faces, young and old, waiting. I began with the same words that started it all. When your own children tell you that you no longer belong in their world, it feels like being erased while you're still alive. The room went silent. Every face, every eye listening. And then I smiled and added, but sometimes, being erased gives you the space to write yourself all over again. Applause filled the hall, thunderous, emotional, overwhelming. In that moment, I felt Robert beside me. I could almost hear his quiet laugh, his proud whisper. You did it, Maggie. After my speech, people lined up just to hug me. Women who said my journey reminded them to chase their dreams again. Mothers who said they finally called their daughters, and daughters who said they finally understood their mother's silence. That night, as I sat in my hotel room overlooking the city lights, I realized something beautiful. I hadn't built a world out of anger or rebellion. I'd built it out of love for myself and for the women who thought their stories were over. Back home in Oregon, life feels quieter again, but never empty. The same house that once echoed with loneliness now buzzes with phone calls, video meetings, and laughter. Sometimes, Emily visits on weekends with her laptop and coffee, setting up meetings for the silver year. Clara brings her kids, my granddaughters, and they help me film little video messages for our online community. Last week, one of them asked, "Grandma, why do so many people listen to you?" I smiled, tucked a strand of silver hair behind my ear, and said, "Because I finally learned to listen to myself." At night, I still sit by my window, the same one where I once cried, wondering if my life still mattered. Now, when I look out, I don't see emptiness. I see a world I helped create, one filled with connection, strength, and grace. And sometimes, when my daughters hug me goodbye, they whisper the words that once broke me, but now heal me completely. "Mom, you understand more than anyone." They said I didn't understand the world anymore. So I built my own. And somehow, in doing that, I found them again too. You're never too old to start over. The world you want might be waiting for you to build it.